Commander Jake Thompson felt his stomach drop as the emergency signal burst through the bridge speakers of the EU's resilience. The voice coming through was barely recognizable as belonging to High Curator Velinara of the Veltar, where once her words had flowed like music. Now they cracked with pure desperation. "Council members, please hear us. Our world is dying. 9 out of every 10 of our people are already gone. The sickness spreads faster than we can count the dead. Our smartest scientists cannot stop it. Our most powerful computers have no answers. We are begging you, the humans, to help us." The bridge went dead silent. Jake looked over at Captain Lisa Rodriguez, who was staring at the communication panel, like it might bite her. Next to her, Dr. Mark Davis was already pulling up medical files on his tablet, his face grim. This was rich, really rich. Just 6 months ago, these same Veltar had tried to block humanity from joining the Galactic Council. They had called humans violent primitives from a death planet and too dangerous for civilized space. The vote had been close, but humanity had squeezed in anyway. Now here they were, crawling back for help from the very barbarians they had tried to keep out. Communications Officer Amy Wilson looked up from her station, her face pale. "Sir, they're sending us everything. Medical scans, genetic data, infection, patterns. This plague, it's not like anything we've ever seen. It's killing them in ways that should be impossible." Jake walked over to the main display screen as the data started coming through. What he saw made his blood run cold. The planet Serenity Prime had once been the crown jewel of Veltar civilization. Massive crystal cities floated in the sky like diamonds, connected by bridges of pure light. Gardens hung in the air, defying gravity with technology humans could barely understand. It had been a paradise that made Earth's greatest cities look like mud huts. Now those same floating cities were dark. The lights that had sparkled like stars were going out one by one. Where millions of Veltar had once lived and worked, now there were only empty buildings and silent streets. The few remaining inhabitants moved like ghosts through their dying world. Captain Dr. Davis spoke up, his voice tight with worry. "Look at these infection rates. This thing spreads through their entire population in days, not weeks or months. And the symptoms, they're attacking both their bodies and their technology at the same time. That shouldn't be possible." Lisa Rodriguez nodded slowly. She had been around long enough to know when something was seriously wrong. "Amy, get me a direct line to Admiral Chen back at headquarters. Tell him we need full medical support and emergency supplies. Whatever this is, we're going to need every advantage we can get." Jake studied the data more carefully. The Veltar were not weak people. They had conquered diseases that would wipe out entire human colonies. Their medical technology was so advanced that they could regrow entire organs in minutes. They had integrated their bodies with computers in ways that made them almost superhuman. If something could bring them to their knees like this, what chance did humans have? But that was the thing about humans. They had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and natural disasters that should have wiped them out completely. Earth was a planet that tried to kill everything on it, and humans had not just survived but thrived. They had fought off viruses, bacteria, parasites, and diseases that the rest of the galaxy had never even dreamed of. Maybe that was exactly what the Veltar needed right now. Not the most advanced medical technology, but the most experienced survivors in the galaxy. "Set course for the Veltar system," Jake ordered, his voice carrying across the bridge. "Maximum speed. And get our medical team ready for full deployment. We're going into unknown territory." As the Resilience turned toward the dying alien world, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this was bigger than just one plague on one planet. Something told him that this was just the beginning of a much larger and more dangerous situation. Dr. Mark Davis took his first breath of alien air the moment he stepped off the shuttle. The basic respirator mask felt almost silly on his face as he looked around at the dying world of Serenity Prime. Behind him, The Veltar guides were wrapped up in massive environmental suits that made them look like walking refrigerators. They stared at him like he had just jumped into a pit of snakes. Dr. Davis, Curator Velanara's voice came through the translator, shaking with fear. You must put on proper protection. The air itself is poison now. It will kill you in minutes. Sergeant. Tom Miller laughed as he adjusted his rifle strap. The big Marine was wearing nothing more than standard combat gear and a simple face mask. Lady, no offense, but this feels like a spring day compared to what we breathe back home. You should try downtown Los Angeles during rush hour. Now that'll kill you. The Veltar guides looked at each other in confusion. They had studied human biology and knew that Earth was considered one of the most dangerous planets in known space. But seeing humans walk around their contaminated world like it was a park was still shocking. Dr. Davis was already moving toward the medical facility, where the sickest patients were being kept. His boots crunched on crystal debris that had fallen from the floating buildings above. The air tasted metallic and wrong, but his lungs handled it just fine. Growing up in industrial zones and polluted cities had prepared him for much worse. Inside the medical center, the scene was heartbreaking. Dozens of Veltar lay on advanced medical beds, their skin pale and their breathing shallow. Strange metal ports along their necks and arms flickered weakly with dying light. These were their neural implants, the technology that made them so much smarter and more capable than regular humans. Show me everything, Davis said, pulling on surgical gloves. The Veltar medical staff stepped back nervously as he approached the patients, where their hands shook with fear and exhaustion. His remained rock steady. For hours, Davis worked alongside his team, taking samples and running tests. The Veltar doctors watched in amazement as the humans handled contaminated materials without the heavy protective gear that their own people required. Nurse Katie Brown moved between patients with calm efficiency, her movements quick and sure. This is incredible, Davis said finally, looking up from his microscope. This plague, it's not just a biological weapon. It's attacking their computer implants at the same time. It's like someone designed it specifically to target enhanced beings. Katie Brown held up a sample vial filled with dark liquid. Doctor, look at this blood work. The virus is having trouble with pure organic tissue. It seems to need those tech implants to really take hold and spread. Without the computer interface, it can't complete its infection cycle. The room went quiet as everyone processed what this meant. The Veltar had spent thousands of years improving themselves with technology. They had eliminated most diseases by integrating computers directly into their bodies. Their immune systems had become dependent on artificial enhancement to function properly, but in doing so, they had created the perfect weakness. The plague was designed to use their greatest strength against them. Every computer enhancement in their bodies became a doorway for the virus to enter and spread. That's why we're not getting sick, Davis realized. Our immune systems are purely biological. We never got rid of the old-fashioned way of fighting diseases. Earth spent millions of years trying to kill us with every virus, bacteria, and parasite imaginable. Our bodies learned to fight back the hard way. Sergeant Miller nodded from his position by the door. Yeah, we call it the hard way for a reason, but it works. Dr. Davis stood up and looked around at the dying aliens. For the first time since they had arrived, he felt a spark of real hope. We can fight this thing. Our primitive immune systems might be exactly what we need. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. The Veltar medical staff exchanged glances. They had always looked down on human biology as crude and inefficient. Now that same crude biology might be the key to saving their entire civilization. Lieutenant Ben Clark had always been good at finding things that others wanted to keep hidden. 3 days into the medical crisis on Serenity Prime, he was doing what he did best, searching through old records and forgotten files in the deepest parts of the Veltar archives. The underground chamber was massive, filled with floating holographic displays that stretched up into the darkness like glowing trees. Most of the archive was filled with boring stuff like trade agreements and cultural records, but buried deep in the oldest sections, Clark found something that made his blood run cold. Ancient war records, thousands of years old, telling the story of a terrible enemy that the Veltar had fought long ago. The holographic displays showed images of machines, not regular robots or computers, but something far worse. They called themselves the Devourers, and they had one simple goal: destroy all organic life in the galaxy. The records showed battle after battle, entire star systems going dark as these machines spread like a plague across space. Clark's hands shook as he activated his communicator. "Captain Rodriguez, you need to get down here right now. This plague, it's not some random disease. It's a weapon. Someone made this thing on purpose." Within minutes, the archive chamber was crowded with people. Captain Rodriguez stood next to Dr. Davis, both of them staring at the ancient displays in horror. Curator Velinara had recovered enough to walk, though she still looked weak and pale. When she saw the old war records, her face went white with terror. "The Devourers," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We thought we had killed them all. The war ended 10,000 years ago. Our ancestors died by the millions to stop them. But if they're back, then this plague makes perfect sense. They always softened up their targets before invasion." Dr. Davis was studying the medical data from the ancient war. "Look at this. They used biological weapons back then too. Different viruses, but the same basic idea: weaken the population, destroy their ability to fight back, then move in for the final kill." The room suddenly filled with the sound of alarms. Engineer Ryan Scott's voice crackled over the communication system from the orbiting human ship. "Captain, we've got big problems up here. Long-range sensors are picking up multiple contacts at the edge of the solar system. Whatever they are, they're huge and they're heading straight for us." Captain Rodriguez felt her stomach drop. "How many ships are we talking about?" "At least 50, maybe more. They're using some kind of stealth technology that makes it hard to get exact numbers. But Captain, these things are massive. Each one is bigger than our entire fleet back home." Curator Velinara sank into a nearby chair, her face filled with despair. "The defense systems, we have ancient weapons hidden throughout this system, built specifically to fight the Devourers. But the plague has left us too weak to operate them. Most of our technical specialists are dead or dying." Lieutenant Clark was still going through the old records, his face grim. "Ma'am, according to these files, the Devourers don't just want to conquer worlds. They want to sterilize them completely. No organic life left anywhere. They see biological creatures as a disease that needs to be cured." Up on the surface, Sergeant Tom Miller was already moving his Marines into defensive positions around the medical facility. He had been in enough fights to know when bad news was coming, and his gut told him they were about to face something terrible. "How long do we have?" Captain Rodriguez asked. Ryan Scott's voice came back through the communicator, tense with worry. "At their current speed, maybe 6 hours before the first scouts reach the inner system. The main fleet will be here in 12 hours." Private Jessica Adams was checking her rifle for the third time, making sure every piece of equipment was ready for combat. She looked up at Sergeant Miller with determination in her eyes. "Sarge, I know we're outnumbered and outgunned, but we didn't come all this way just to watch these people die." Sergeant Miller nodded, proud of his Marines. "That's right, Adams. We're humans. We don't know how to quit, even when we probably should." Curator Velinara looked at the human soldiers with amazement. They knew they were facing an enemy that had destroyed entire civilizations, and yet they were preparing to fight anyway. "You cannot possibly hope to win against the Devourers. They have weapons that can crack planets in half." Captain Rodriguez walked over to the ancient war displays, studying the tactical information. "Maybe we can't win a straight fight, But humans have a long history of finding ways to survive impossible situations. We're going to need those defense systems working, and we're going to need them fast. The chamber fell silent as everyone realized what they were facing. An ancient enemy had returned, and the galaxy's best hope for survival might be a small group of humans who refused to give up, even when facing certain death. Dr. Davis stood in the center of the emergency meeting room, surrounded by the last surviving leaders of the Veltar civilization. His medical bag sat on the table between them, containing vials of the cure he had worked day and night to create. But the expression on his face was anything but hopeful. "I've got good news and terrible news," he began, his voice heavy with the weight of what he was about to say. "The good news is that I can cure this plague. I can save your people and stop the virus from spreading any further." High Curator Velinara leaned forward in her chair, her weak hands gripping the armrests. Around the table, the other surviving leaders held their breath, waiting for the catch they all knew was coming. "The terrible news is the price," Davis continued. "To cure this virus, I have to shut down all of your neural implants, completely. Every computer enhancement in your bodies has to go offline for the treatment to work." The room went dead silent. For the Veltar, their neural implants weren't just technology. They were part of who they were. These devices made them smarter than any human could ever hope to be. They could process information at lightning speed, access vast databases of knowledge instantly, and solve complex problems in seconds that would take humans days or weeks without their implants. They would be reduced to basic biological thinking. They would become, in their own words, primitives. Just like the humans they had always looked down upon. "You're asking us to become like you," whispered Council Member Teleron, his voice filled with horror. "To give up everything that makes us who we are." Dr. Davis nodded sadly. "I know what I'm asking, but it's the only way. The virus uses your implants as a pathway to kill you. Without the implants, the virus has nothing to attack." Outside the meeting room, the sound of human voices could be heard as the Marines prepared for the coming battle. Corporal Mike Johnson's voice crackled over the radio as he gave Captain Rodriguez a situation report. "Captain, long-range sensors show the Devourer main fleet will be here in about 3 hours. Our current defensive capabilities consist of 43 Marines, to medical staff, and whatever weapons we can scrounge up. In other words, we're completely screwed." But instead of panic or despair, there was something else in Johnson's voice. Determination. The same stubborn human refusal to give up that had carried the species through ice ages, world wars, and countless disasters. Captain Rodriguez watched her people work from the command center they had set up in an abandoned Veltar building. Marines were setting up defensive positions, checking weapons, and preparing for a fight they knew they couldn't win. But not one of them was talking about surrender or retreat. Back in the meeting room, the Veltar leaders were struggling with the impossible choice laid before them: die as the advanced beings they had always been, or live as the primitives they had always despised. High Curator Velinara closed her eyes and thought about her people. Millions were already dead. Millions more were dying every hour. The plague was spreading faster than they could count the casualties. Soon, there would be no Veltar left at all. "We accept," she whispered, her voice so quiet that everyone had to strain to hear her. "Begin the treatment. Save whoever you can." Dr. Davis nodded and immediately got to work. The cure spread through the Veltar population like wildfire. But instead of bringing death, it brought a different kind of change. As their neural implants shut down one by one, the surviving Veltar felt their enhanced minds becoming simpler, more basic. At first, it was terrifying. Complex calculations that had once been effortless became impossible. Information that had been instantly available was now lost. They felt like they were becoming stupid, reduced to the level of primitive animals. But then something unexpected began to happen. Without the constant stream of data and enhanced processing power, Their minds began to work in different ways. They started to notice things they had never seen before, to think about problems from angles they had never considered. Velinara stood up from her medical bed, feeling stronger than she had in weeks. But her mind felt strange, different somehow. She looked around the room and suddenly noticed details she had never paid attention to before. The way the light fell through the windows, the expression on Dr. Davis's face, the sound of human voices. In the distance, "This is very strange," she said, her voice uncertain but somehow more alive than it had been in years. "I can see solutions to problems that I never noticed before. My mind feels slower, but also more flexible somehow." Engineer Ryan Scott, who had been monitoring the conversation from his position at the communication station, smiled grimly. "Welcome to being human, ma'am. We may not be the smartest species in the galaxy, but we're pretty good at figuring out creative ways to solve problems." Velinara walked over to the window and looked out at the Marines preparing for battle. For the first time in her life, she really understood what she was seeing. Not just the tactical situation or the logical outcomes, but the human spirit that refused to accept defeat, even when facing impossible odds. "Now," Ryan continued, "let's figure out how we're going to kill some machines." The sky above Serenity Prime turned black as the Devourer fleet arrived. Hundreds of massive warships dropped out of hyperspace, each one the size of a city, and covered in weapons that could crack planets in half. They had destroyed entire civilizations, with fleets like this, wiping out billions of lives without breaking a sweat. But today, they found something they hadn't expected, down on the surface of the dying alien world. A small group of humans was digging in for a fight they couldn't possibly win. Captain Rodriguez stood in the command center they had thrown together in an abandoned Veltar building. Through the broken windows, she could see her Marines setting up defensive positions between the crystal ruins. 43 soldiers against an army of machines that had conquered half the galaxy. "All units, listen up," she spoke into her radio, her voice calm and steady. "These things are machines. They think in patterns. They follow logic. They calculate odds. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to be completely unpredictable. When they expect us to run, we charge. When they think we should surrender, we fight harder." The first wave of Devourer ground forces hit the surface like a metallic tsunami. Robot soldiers poured out of landing craft, their weapons firing streams of energy that could melt through steel. Their tactical computers had calculated that the human resistance would collapse within minutes. They were wrong. Sergeant Tom Miller and his Marines did something that broke every rule of military logic. When the overwhelming enemy force should have made them retreat, they advanced instead, when the smart thing would have been to find cover and hold defensive positions. They split up and started moving in random patterns that made no sense. The Devourer machines had been programmed to fight rational opponents. Their computers could predict the movements of logical military forces and counter them perfectly. But humans weren't logical. They were crazy, unpredictable, and too stubborn to know when they were beaten. Private Jessica Adams found herself pinned down behind a piece of fallen crystal architecture, enemy fire raining down around her. According to every tactical manual ever written, she should have stayed put and called for backup. Instead, she did something completely insane. She stood up and charged straight at the enemy position, screaming at the top of her lungs. The Devourer robots hesitated for a split second, their computers struggling to process this illogical behavior. That hesitation was all Adams needed to get close enough to throw a grenade into their midst. Meanwhile, in the medical facility, something amazing was happening. The Veltar who had been cured of the plague were discovering that losing their computer implants hadn't made them weaker. In some ways, it had made them stronger. Curator Velinara was working alongside Dr. Davis, both of them trying to figure out how to activate the ancient defense systems that had been built to fight the Devourers thousands of years ago. Without her neural implants, Velanara couldn't access the technical manuals or run complex calculations, but she could do something she hadn't been able to do in years. She could think creatively. "Doctor," she said suddenly, her eyes lighting up with excitement, "I've been approaching this all wrong. We don't need to understand how these weapons work. We just need to turn them on and point them at the enemy." The breakthrough came when Corporal Mike Johnson, trapped in a building surrounded by enemy forces, made an observation that changed everything. The ancient Veltar defense systems weren't just automated weapons. They could be operated manually, like giant cannons from the old days of warfare. "Captain," Johnson's voice crackled over the radio. "These alien weapons, they've got manual controls, big red buttons and everything. We don't need to be computer geniuses to use them." What happened next was something the galaxy had never seen before. Humans and Veltar working together as a team, combining the best of both species. The Marines provided covering fire and tactical expertise, while the Veltar used their knowledge of the ancient weapons to bring the defense systems online. The battle turned into something beautiful and terrible at the same time. Human soldiers would charge forward to capture a weapon emplacement. Then Veltar technicians would activate the alien technology to blast Devourer ships out of the sky. It was primitive tactics merged with advanced technology, and it was working. The Devourers had been designed to fight predictable civilizations that followed logical patterns. They had never faced an enemy that combined human stubbornness with alien firepower. Their computers couldn't calculate a defense against opponents who refused to act rationally. One by one, the massive Devourer ships began falling from the sky. Their weapons, designed to destroy rational opponents, couldn't handle enemies who fought with their hearts instead of their heads. When the last enemy ship crashed into the crystal plains of Serenity Prime, and strange quiet fell over the battlefield, the Devourers were gone. Their threat ended by the most unlikely alliance in galactic history. Velanara stood next to Captain Rodriguez in the ruins of what had once been her beautiful world. Both women were dirty, exhausted, and marked by battle. But they were alive, and their peoples were safe. "You saved us," Velanara said simply, her voice filled with gratitude and wonder. Rodriguez shook her head and smiled. "No, ma'am, we saved each other. That's what humans do. We adapt, we survive, and we make sure everyone else gets to do the same thing." The galaxy would never be the same after the Battle of Serenity Prime. Word spread quickly that sometimes the best way to solve a problem wasn't to become more advanced or more logical. Sometimes, you just needed to remember what made you strong in the first place.